Hi everybody, Steven here. In this video, we're going to talk about this thing called VMware Live Site Recovery, formerly known as Site Recovery Manager. So if you want to learn all about that, stick around. We'll see you in a bit. Bye now. Hey, thanks for sticking around. So what we're going to do in this video is take a look at VMware's Live Site Recovery, or formerly known as Site Recovery Manager. Now, in this video, all I'm going to do is talk about what it is. The next video, I'll show you how to install it and get it set up. And then subsequent videos will show you how to create recovery plans, we'll do failures, all that wonderful stuff. Okay, but for now we need to learn how to walk before we run. Now before I jump right into it, for those of you that have already subscribed to the channel, 2 thumbs up to you, thank you very much. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please support the channel by subscribing to it. Other ways to support channels are by liking, sharing the videos. I also have super thanks enabled, totally up to you. Also, again, I looked at the stats. A lot of people are watching these videos, but I'm not getting a lot of thumbs up, hitting those likes. Please hit that like button. It's one click. That's all you got to do. Hit that like button, and that helps out with the YouTube algorithm. So I'd really appreciate it. Anyways, enough of that. Let's jump into it. Okay, so let me get to my iPad over here. Okay, and that's what I want. All right, so let's jump into it right now. Okay, so let's talk about, again, the new name is now called VMware Live Site Recovery. There's actually a couple of names here, and I find it sometimes maybe a little confusing. So first of all, just a quick introductory slide. First of all, they got this thing called VMware Live Recovery. Don't get that mixed up with VMware Live Site Recovery, okay? This is kind of like an overall encompassing solution that includes 2 different components, right? So they got different licensing models. I'll leave that up to your account reps. I don't even want to get down the licensing road, but generally speaking, it's usually on a per VM basis. But I'll just leave it alone because we all know the changes that went on with VMware and Broadcom, right? So Live Recovery says 2 proven VMware technologies in this unified console. So the first technology is this thing called Live Cyber Recovery, or Live Recovery. Okay, this was formerly known as VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery plus ransomware, and this is really using vSphere replication to help you protect yourself against cyber attacks, right? You know, you get all of a sudden something happening, you've got infiltrated, somebody, you know, whatever, did something bad to your environment, it's ransoming your environment. This allows you to kind of, I guess, roll back to previous ones. I'm not going to be covering that in this video, maybe in a subsequent one. This would be more of a software as a service type solution. VMware Live Recovery, again, this was formerly called Site Recovery Manager. Again, this is what we're actually going to look at. So this allows us to do protection of our sites, which we'll see in a minute. So what is Site Recovery Manager, or Live Site Recovery, right? So it is a business continuity and disaster recovery solutions. Okay, so Site Recovery Manager, or Live Recovery, allows you to protect your site. So let's say you've got 2 data centers, right? All of a sudden one data center dies, something happens, got hit by a meteorite. You can basically restart your workloads back on the recovery site. It does a lot more than that for you as well, which we'll take a look at, okay? But that's generally what it's doing. It's basically protecting you from your site. Like, there's all kinds of disaster, ice storms, flooding, all that kind of stuff. So, some businesses go out of business because of that, because they're, you know, all their data is gone, their servers are gone, and all this kind of stuff. So this allows us to protect our site. It also allows us to be proactive. So let's talk a little bit about that. So first of all, and I'll demo this when we get into creating this in another subsequent video, but I can create this thing called recovery plans. Now, what is a recovery plan? All right. Now, a recovery plan is a virtualized thing called a run book. Now, back in the old days, let's say, you know, you've got your data center, you got all your different workloads, and they had to plan for a disaster, right? So they would have some kind of DR site, a second site, and they would want it in such a way where somebody with some very basic training could go through a book and check off this, check that, check this, so on, do this, do that. You know, as long as they could use a mouse and a keyboard, That was kind of the idea. It should be something that somebody could follow along very simply, right? Now, this book could be thousands of pages long, and this book is only good if it's maintained and updated frequently. So if you're making changes to your live environment, that book has to be changed. So, and that caused a lot of problems because that was a lot of work, and a lot of times these books weren't updated. So when something happened in an environment and they go to recover, they found that they had issues, right? So this recovery plan is basically a virtualization of this run book, right? I run a recovery plan and it does all this stuff for me. Starts up this VM, does this, does that, that sort of thing. That's what a recovery plan is. And I'll show you that in a subsequent video. The big thing, what I really like about here is testing the recovery plan. Okay, so a lot of people implement a disaster recovery solution, but how often do they test it? A recovery solution is useless unless you test it. And ideally, you should test it often. To me, if you test it once a year, well, it's better than nothing, I guess. But what happened in that year? You might have made changes, you applied service packs, whatever. You know, all these different things might have been changed in your environment. And then now when you go to do a test, you find a year later things aren't working quite as well as they should be. This allows a site recovery manager, to me, this is the beauty of it. It allows me to test my recovery plans without impacting my production site. Okay, and we'll see how that kind of works later on, okay, in a subsequent video. So I can test as much as I want, and the really good thing about that is it builds confidence. You know, hey, if there's a disaster, oh, I tested that last week, it's going to work like a charm, right? So testing often is very important. Site Recovery Manager allows you to do that really easy, okay? Allows us to fire up these test workloads in an isolated network and then say, hey, yeah, is this application working? Oh, yeah, it's working. Great. Or no, hey, something's happened. 2 weeks ago it was working. What's changed? Oh, somebody applied a patch or made a change. Then, you can catch things before there's actually a disaster. You could also use it for planned migrations and real disaster. What's a planned migration? A planned migration is basically, just like it says, you're planning something. So let's say you see this disaster's coming in, right? This ice storm's coming in. You know there's going to be flooding. There's a hurricane coming in, right? A planned migration is, oh, I've got my data center A over here. It's in the path of that hurricane. I better move my workloads over to the other data center that's not in that path, okay? And that's what a planned migration is. It allows you to basically do, let's say, well, there's a couple different ways of planned migration, but I'll explain one way. It allows you to cleanly shut down those VMs, make an updated copy of them, and then fire them up on that other location. So you know everything is perfectly fine and up to date, okay? That's kind of what a planned migration is. You're planning it, you know there's a disaster coming, you're moving out of the way, all right? So that's really cool. A real disaster, let's say, again, I'll give demos on this in videos, but a real disaster would be like a forced failover. Let's say all of a sudden something happened to data center A. Boom, a meteorite hit it. Boom, it's gone. It ain't coming back. I've got a copy over my recovery site. I could fire them up. It may not be up to date. It might be a few minutes out or 10 minutes out, or that really depends. And I'll talk about recovery point objectives later on in subsequent videos when we start setting all this stuff up. But that's kind of the idea. It allows us to bring it back up in case there is an actual disaster and that other site's not there for me to do a clean shutdown. Perform reprotection and failback. Basically, let's say, yeah, the disaster's over, everything's fine, our site survived, I want to move things back. Right? I could do something like that. We'll talk about that. And another thing it's really good for, and this goes back to this testing your disaster recovery plans, is you could use this to do like upgrades, to test upgrades. So let's say you go, oh, we need to upgrade this workload, this application. Well, I don't really want to do it on the production one because if something goes bad, I'm going to have a bad day, right? So you can say, oh, let's do a test recovery plan. So now you've got your test, you got your application running over at the other site, and you can do the upgrade there and see if it blows things up or not. So you can do your patches or whatever. Yeah, everything's working great. Yeah, okay, we can do it on the live environment. So it gives you that more higher level of confidence. So we get a couple of things here that to me are very powerful. The testing to me is extremely powerful. You could test quite a bit and it builds that confidence level. All right, So now let's take a look at the architecture of Site Recovery Manager, or Live Site Recovery, okay? You'll probably hear me calling it Site Recovery Manager because that's all I've been calling it for the past many, many years, right? So first of all, you'll see we actually have two sites here. I'll call this Site A on the left, Site B on the right, okay? Just for simplicity. First thing we're going to notice, each site has its own vCenter server. Okay, so there's two vCenter servers. There's one in Site A, there's one in Site B. Yes, and they have to both be licensed. All right, talk to licensing folks. Okay, now you'll also notice we've got some hosts over here in Site A. These are my ESXi hosts, and then over in Site B, we also have some ESXi hosts. Do they have to be exactly the same? Not necessarily, but anyways. Now notice I've got some VMs running over here in Site A. Oops. I could also have some VMs running over here on Site B as well if I wanted to, okay? Or I don't. We'll take a look at some of the architectures or deployment scenarios that you could do. All right, you'll also notice, let's clear all of my scribblies. So we got our vCenter server, we got a bunch of ESXi hosts at both sites, great. And we have some kind of storage, whether it's vSAN, some kind of supported vSphere storage, iSCSI, fiber channel, virtual volumes, vSAN, whatever. I don't care, NFS. And they don't have, actually, I'll come back to that one in a minute, all right? You'll notice at the top, I've got this thing called a Site Recovery Manager appliance. This is an appliance, which is a pre-made virtual machine that you need to install. And notice you install it at both sites, Site A and Site B. And it's going to be paired up. This Site Recovery Manager on Site A will be paired with this vCenter server. This one on Site B will be paired with this one. And I'll walk you through that in my video when I'm showing you setting it up and installing it. Okay? So great. Now, in order for this to work, all right, so let's say we got Site A over here on the left. And if something happens to Site A, well, that means all these VMs down here are not accessible. Well, where are the VMs located? Well, remember, a virtual machine is just a bunch of files, right? That's all it really is. So if I've got, and I apologize for my camera over here blocking this. Let me actually get rid of that. Oops, didn't want to do that. There we go. So let's get rid of my video there. So remember, your virtual machines reside on storage. Let's forget about VMs over here on the right side, okay, just for now. So your VMs are just, you know, files on storage. So how does this work? We need to make a copy. If this site goes down on the left, well, the copies better exist over here, over on Site B, or else it's useless. So we need to make copies of the VMs. How do we do that? Well, there's a couple of ways. The first way is array-based replication. What does that mean? Your storage over here, whatever storage subsystem you're using, fiber channel, iSCSI, virtual volumes, whatever, Dell, Hitachi, I don't care, EMC, whatever storage you're using here on Site A, you're probably using the same model or type on Site B. Notice I said probably, okay? And over the storage here, you're going to have, let's say you'll have LUNs, LUN 1, LUN 2, whatever, LUN 3, whatever, okay? And your VMs are stored on those LUNs, the various LUNs. Now, array-based replication means the physical storage, your physical storage down here, Dell, Hitachi, EMC, whatever, I don't care, has the capabilities of replicating. Let me change my colors over here. I'll go with green. Maybe I shouldn't go with green. Let's try blue. Has the ability to mirror LUNs. And that is usually done at the hardware level. LUN 1, LUN 2, LUN 3. And I'll call that LUN 1 prime, LUN 2 prime, LUN 3. So you go into your storage, whatever storage subsystem you have, you click on various buttons in there. How do you do that? You got to talk to your storage vendor. And then you can actually mirror the LUNs over here. So now whatever is occurring on that LUN, let's say LUN 1 here, whatever changes occurring on LUN 1 also occur at LUN 1 over here that you're mirroring at the other site. So this is done in hardware, LUN mirroring. And there's different ways of doing this. Now, this mirroring can be two different methods, asynchronously or synchronously. Synchronously means you're synchronizing the LUNs. So whatever changes occur on LUN 1 also occurs on LUN 1 over here on the far right. So when I do a write to LUN 1, that write must also complete on LUN 1 over here before the acknowledgement is sent back. They're both synchronized. The advantage of that is, you know, whatever is here on site A is also on site B. You're guaranteed that. What's the downside of that? Usually that's expensive, okay? Usually these sites, site A, we'll say on the left, and site B, usually have to be kind of close together. It could be like 10 milliseconds apart. So that limits your distance. And because of that, because you have a smaller distance, if you got a hurricane coming in, it may impact both data centers, okay? So you got to look at your hardware, whatever solution you're using, to see, okay, what's that requirement for distance/latency between the storage. And this is usually a feature you have to pay for, and it's usually big dollars, right? And again, back in my IBM days, I taught storage on the Fast-T and stuff like that, or 5000s and all this wonderful stuff, and I explained on how to set those up, right? So that's one method. Your storage can also do asynchronous replication. That means, again, we've got our LUNs over here, LUN 1, I'll just try 2 LUNs, and you got your mirrored copy over here on the site B, okay? Asynchronous means when I'm writing to LUN 1, the acknowledgement is sent back right away. And then when your storage gets a chance, it updates LUN 1 over here. So they're out of sync just a little bit, right? So there's the potential, if this site goes down, that this over here might be a little bit out of sync with the other one. So you might, I don't like saying it, but you might lose some data, right? Things may not be synchronized. The advantage of that is that's usually a cheaper solution. Also, it usually means you can have them much further apart. I could probably have them like on the East Coast and then on the West Coast type of thing. So if a hurricane's coming in on the East Coast, no problems, I can flip it over to the West Coast. Life is good, okay? So that's hardware-based, array-based replication. And again, that's done down here on a supported subsystem by VMware, okay? Suppose if you can't afford that. Suppose if you don't have that. How about this? Let's say you're using vSAN on both sites. So much for hardware replication. So the only other solution is vSphere replication. vSphere replication has been around for a very long time. This does asynchronous replication. It's software replication. Replication is now done at the VM kernel of the host. So the host is shipping that stuff across, and it's asynchronously. And we can specify different levels of what they call recovery point objectives. Today we can go down as low as 1 minute. I'll talk about that in another video when we start setting it up. I'll probably do a separate video on vSphere replication. But anyways, when I get into showing you how to set this up, which will be not the next video, probably the next video after that, we'll talk a little bit about that. So we can specify different levels of recovery point objective. Anyways, so that's what vSphere replication is. And if you're licensed for vSphere, you've probably got this license as well. It generally includes it, okay? I think if you have the, I think it's the Essentials editions. Don't quote me on this. I don't think it comes with it, but I'm not sure. Anyways, there's been a lot of changes at Broadcom or VMware, so we'll leave that alone. All right. The other thing I want to point out, so we've got 2 different ways to replicate the VM's files from site A to site B. We could do it with hardware, or we could do it with software. You can do both. There's nothing wrong with that. I could have maybe some of my more critical machines, I'll use the hardware-based replication, and maybe for test dev and all that kind of stuff, I don't care, I'll use software. You could use both, no problems. All right. By the way, whatever hardware you're using down here to do this replication has to be on the hardware compatibility list, okay? It has to be supported for Site Recovery Manager, so always check that. Now, one last component I want to point out here, okay, is this SRA. So this SRA, actually it's not the last thing I'll point out, but anyways, this SRA, or Storage Replication Adapter, it's a plugin you install, okay? This Storage Replication Adapter, if you notice, I've got a little line here, it's a little grayed out, going down to your storage. This is not for vSAN. I'm going to scratch that off, okay? Now, what this storage replication adapter does, if you're doing hardware-based or array-based replication, if you're doing array-based replication, it allows Site Recovery Manager Appliance to talk to your storage to see, hey, is everything synchronized, what's going on? It also has the capabilities of telling it to do a snapshot for me. Yes, you can actually, against storage subsystems, I can have a LUN 1 here that I'm mirroring to a LUN 1 here, and then I could do, let me change my colors, so go green. I could do a snapshot of that LUN1 where I could do writes to it. So how does it do that? It basically uses this storage replication adapter. Site Recovery Manager will talk to your storage subsystem and say, hey, do this for me. Also, it has the ability to say, hey, let's say, just for argument's sake, let's say here's my LUN1 here, and I'm mirroring to LUN1 over here. Let's say this is the active one, and this is the standby. Okay? If there's a failure in this site over here, the storage replication adapter on site B has the capabilities to tell the storage, hey, LUN1 is no longer standby, it is now active. So this is what we use this, a couple things that we use this storage replication adapter for. Where do you get that? You can get it from VMware Site, okay, in the support area where you can download all the Site Recovery Manager files. I would probably get it from the vendor. So whatever storage subsystem you're using here, Hitachi, whatever, I don't care, whatever you're using, go to that vendor and get it. Make sure that version is supported by Site Recovery Manager, and they both should be the same, okay? They should be the same version. You shouldn't have, let's say this is version 1.5 over here, this should be 2.0, let's say. I'm talking about the storage replication adapter. Keep everything the same, all right? Life is good. Keep things simple, right? Now, there's one thing I do want to point out here, all right? One last thing, and then we'll continue on, is the appliance. Notice I mentioned Site Recovery Manager, or VMware Live Recovery, Live Site Recovery. I'll get used to that name. Anyways, it's an appliance. It's just like vCenter Server, it's an appliance. It's a pre-made virtual machine. That wasn't always the case. This used to, back in the old days, this was a Windows server that you installed a Site Recovery Manager application on it. And that was quite a long time back, and I can't remember the versions, and I don't care, to be honest with you. But moving forward, VMware said, okay, we're going to introduce the appliance. Just like vCenter Server used to be a Windows application, but now it's appliance. And they had both of them sticking around for quite a while. And I think it was a version 8. I can't remember what version 8. But anyways, VMware said, we no longer support the Windows version. You need to get the appliance, and I think that was 8.2. I think they did that change in, right? Don't quote me on the version, but anyways, just want to let you know. So if any of you are still out there using the Windows version, you'll need to migrate it over, and I think they got a tool for that. But greenfield installs and new installs, it's the appliance you're downloading, and today it's version 9. Okay, that's what we'll be talking about. Okay, in the previous picture, I mentioned we can do hardware-based replication or software-based. All right. Let's talk about vSphere replication in a quick nutshell. By the way, you do not need Site Recovery Manager to use vSphere replication. So if you're a mom and pop shop, you can just use vSphere replication. You don't get recovery plans and all that kind of cool stuff. All right. So anyways, let's talk about the architecture of vSphere replication. First of all, you'll see we've got our two sites here. They call it a protected site. I'm just going to call this site A and site B, just for argument's sake. Site A. Okay. Let's change my pen. First of all, you'll see we've got our vCenter Server appliance. They're not showing in this picture since this is just vSphere replication. I'm going to draw it in Site Recovery Manager at both sites. SRM, Site Recovery. Let me just put a line down there, right? You'll see, now with vSphere replication, you'll see that there's a vSphere replication appliance on both sites. So you download this, and I'll show you this in my next upcoming video, how to install it. So you have the appliance here. Now, if I looked inside that appliance, right? Let's just take a quick, if I looked inside that appliance, I would have a management component and I'd have a server component, okay? Keep that in the back of your mind, it's kind of important. So then we have a vSphere replication agent that's already on your, these are my ESXi servers, that's already on your ESXi servers, and you have this vSphere replication iSCSI filter. And what this is really saying, just in a quick nutshell, what happens is you've got your VMs. When your virtual machine goes to talk to its to the physical disk, so when it goes to write out to the data store, well, the VM actually goes through this SCSI filter, this virtual SCSI filter. So it knows what blocks are being changed down here. So we are completely aware of every VM and what blocks they're changing. And that's kind of the idea behind this agent. And the agent, my picture's getting a little messy now, the agent is responsible for shipping over the changed blocks. So it's not dumping the whole VM all the time. initially, when you set up, oh, I want to protect this VM, it's got to ship that VM all the way across here. So if that's 100 gigabytes in size, it's dumping 100 gigs worth of data, which can be a bit brutal on bandwidth. Okay, you can, and I'll see if I can demo this in my upcoming or follow-up video, is I can actually put a seed device out there. That means I can make a copy of this VM, get the VMDK, make it, or VMDKs, copy it, you know, sneaker net it over to here and dump it onto my data store. And then when I set up replication, it will see that seed disk. It's called a seed disk, like a plant seed. And it'll say, oh, great, I've got this seed disk. Let me check it to the original. And it does like a check to see what blocks are different. And then it'll just update the blocks. So it saves you from dumping over a massive amount of data, right? Like doing what's called a full sync. So the iSCSI filter, we know what blocks have changed. The replication agent here, the vSphere replication agent, sends those changed blocks to your vSphere replication server. Now, notice over here I got vSphere replication appliance, further vSphere replication servers. And remember I said before, if I looked at the appliance has basically I'll call it the management component and the server component. So this agent over here on the far left side on site A fires that data all the way over to the server component, and then the server component is responsible using the network file copy of your ESX host to send those changed blocks down to the data store. So that's kind of what it's doing. Now, why do we see a replication appliance and further replication servers? The server, now this has changed over the last few releases. Before, vSphere replication could only handle up to 2,000 VMs, replicate up to 2,000 VMs, and that changed to 3,000. Today, it's 4,000. Okay, so that means each replication server can handle up to 400 VMs. So remember I said this appliance has a replication server component in it, so that's up to 400 VMs. If I want more than that, remember I said you can support up to 4,000 VMs, I could deploy an additional 9 more replication servers, and each would do 400. So that would be a total of 10, 4,000. Okay, so that's what these replication servers are for. In version 9, they introduced a newer technology. I'll save that for when I get into the vSphere replication and stuff like that. I'll talk a little bit about it there. But in a nutshell, this is generally what you're dealing with, right? Now, notice over here, they're calling this the protected site. Again, I got my replication appliance here. They don't show you servers. You may be replicating like this way and that way. I got VMs over here. Then I'm replicating to this site. I've got VMs over here. Then I'm replicating. So you could see the appliance at both sites and servers at both sites as well, depending on how many VMs you're protecting and stuff. So we'll go through in my next video, we'll go through showing you how to install Site Recovery Manager appliance, and we'll show you how to install the vSphere replication appliance, and I'll touch on the replication server as well. Okay. So what are some supported topologies? So the first one here is active passive. So here's what they call their protected site, and then you got your recovery site. So let's say this is site A on the left, site B on the right. Okay, that means all my workloads run on site A. There's nothing running on site B. If something should happen to site A, again the VMs will start up the copies of the VMs on site B. I don't want to say fail over. It's not HA. Okay. So we start up we recover the VMs on site B. We start them up from a copy, all right? Okay, that's fine. This works, no problems. The problem with this solution is your recovery site, it has no workloads. It's just sitting there waiting for the disaster to happen. So it's kind of wasteful when you think about it. Then they got an active here. I don't know if I like this description, but anyways, an active. Here's my protected site. These are all my critical workloads running over here. Here's my recovery site, so I'm basically replicating my stuff over here, just like in this one. And notice there's VMs running here, but these might be test dev VMs you don't care about. If something should happen to my protected site, generally you'll power on these VMs here will be recovered on this site. You may say, okay, you know what? We don't have enough resources to run the test VMs and the critical VMs. So we're going to power these guys off and then run our mission critical workloads. So you have that capabilities as well. All right, that's a little better than this guy. At least you're making some use of that other site, which is fine. The other one here is bidirectional. To me, that's really truly active-active. You've got production workloads running in both sites. Each site is protecting the other site. So the VMs over here, the blue VMs, are being replicated over here. Let's try this again. The blue VMs are being replicated over here. The orange VMs, again, are being replicated over here. If something should happen to one of the sites, both sites are protected sites. Notice they're called protected sites. Both are running workloads. So if this site here fails, it's the blue workloads, and the blue workloads will power back on or be recovered at that site. Okay, we start them up. So that's probably one that makes a little bit more sense. Now this last one here, notice they stretch storage. What is that? In my previous example, I talked about doing hardware-based replication. All right, I said LUN1's on site A, LUN2, the mirror of LUN1's on site B. Okay, generally speaking, the one on site A. Let's go back to that picture. Yeah, sorry, it's right here. So if I had a LUN here, LUN1 here, this would be read-write. And then the mirror copy over here, I'll call it LUN1 prime, is read-only. Okay? There's no writing capabilities on it, generally. Okay? So that's why I would say this is active and that one's standby. If this site fails over here, the storage replication adapter will say, oh, this is now going to be active, therefore it's going to be read-writable. Okay? That's generally how it works. Some storage, personally, I've never played with any of these because it'd be big dollars for it. Some storage allows you to have LUN1 here, LUN1 here, and you're mirroring, and they're both read-writable. Read-writable. So essentially, what did you just do? Again, if your storage supports this, it's going to be a big if, and it'll be a big, probably dollars. Essentially, you have a stretched LUN across both sites. The advantage of that is, remember I talked about doing a plan migration? So I've got my VMs over here, and I want to do a plan migration. Generally, I'm shutting down and then starting them back up on the other site in case a hurricane's coming in. With this shared or stretched storage, I could do a vMotion. Zero downtime for planned migration. Not disaster, planned migration. So when it's fast, we know how fast vMotion is. So hopefully you do. Again, it's fast because the VM's not powered off. It's just, we're doing just a memory dump, let's say just over here. Okay, it's a vMotion. All right. So it does support that capabilities if your storage supports that. And like I said, personally, I've never played with storage that does that, but doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But it's going to probably be very expensive. All right. Now, another thing I want to throw this out at this point in the slide here, this recovery site, we'll just leave this one down here. This could be in the cloud. Maybe you've got some kind of cloud provider, AWS, Google, whoever, IBM, that's running VMware. You know, I could be a cloud provider running VMware and say, hey, I'll protect your sites. So I'll run SRM over here, right? So this could be in the cloud. When they talk about multi-site here, generally SRM is site to site. So I'm protecting VMs over here to site B, and that's it. In this example, I'm not a big fan of this picture here, but it can be done. All right. This, don't get confused in this picture where I've got a VM here. Here's my VM, and it's being protected at both sites. I'm making a copy of both sites. That's not the case. It's only going to one site. So I might have some VMs being protected on site B, and some VMs protected on site C, something like that, and some VMs over here being protected. All right, you'll notice there's an SRM, a copy of SRM, 2 copies in each site. You could do something like this. Anyways, I'm not sure how useful that could be. This one here is actually quite useful. This is think of a DR as a service. So I could be an ISP, or better yet, this could be a head office over here, HQ, right? And these could be regional or remote offices. And you're going to use your head office as a backup. So your primary stuff runs, let me change my colors. The primary stuff runs here on the remote site. But if there's a failure, we have the ability to fail these workloads over to HQ. You'll notice there's a site recovery manager in each location, paired up with another site recovery manager in the headquarters. I think you can do, I haven't looked at the latest version of 9, but last I knew it was like you could do up to 10. Okay, so this could be another valid solution. Think of it as like DR as a service, or like a remote office and headquarters type of thing. That's it. Really, really quick thing on Site Recovery Manager, as long as you get the basics. My next video, again, watch my next video. That'll be up here somewhere, talking about how to set it up. All right? So, hey, by the way, if you like this, please hit that thumbs up button. Click on this. Really, not a lot of people are clicking on that, so I appreciate the ones that are. Also support the channel by subscribing. Leave comments and questions down below. Any requests, leave them down below. I'll see what I can do. I recently just purchased some new hardware. I'll talk about that in another video. And that's it. Thanks again, everybody. See you in the next one. Bye.